Good afternoon, Portsmouth. How we doing?
Hey, so
I think they can hear us in Washington, not just today, but each and every day up until this next election. We've got to make sure that they hear us. We've got to make sure that they don't have one more opportunity to raise our taxes, take our freedoms, and take our liberties. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the book that we stand for. This book, it's the Constitution. This is what we stand for. This is what our founding fathers fought for. This is what our grandparents and our parents fought for. This is what we're fighting for in November. A year ago, I stood before a crowd of 3,000 people in Manchester at the Tea Party. After we were in Market Square. How many people were in Market Square last year, remember? We got so big we had to come down here this year. And next year it's going to get so big we're going to go back down to D.C. and tell them what we think. But I stood in Manchester a year ago with so many of our friends, and we stood together and we said enough. Enough of taking our freedom. Enough of taking our liberty. Enough of taking advantage of good American citizens. And we have stood together for not just a year, but we will stand together for the next decade to protect this state, and to protect our country, and to protect our freedoms. And I thank each and every one of you for coming out day after day after day and fighting for our country. You mean the world to this cause. Don't let anybody ever tell you that your voice is going to be muffled. Don't let anybody ever tell you that they're not going to listen. Because in November, we will make sure they have all heard our unique and very strong voice. Thank you all very much for coming. It's been great to serve you, and I look forward to being with you next year. Enjoy the afternoon. Take care. God bless America.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff told me that the Portsmouth Tea Party would bear the most intelligent, informed folks across the entire state. So I have one quiz question to put that to the test. And it's along the Obama or Founders line. Exercise in a bottle. Obama or the Founders? You got it. Now listen, I am so heartened to see this crowd of 300 people, 400 people gathered here in Portsmouth. And I'll tell you, there are a couple people who will not be heartened when you show up on November 2nd to vote them out of office. And they are Nancy Pelosi and Carol Shea Porter. Now let me tell you something. Where do you think they are today? You think they're out talking to people, average Americans who are filing into post office to drop their hard-earned tax dollars off to send to Washington to get wasted on big government programs? I highly doubt they're out talking to anyone today. But we will talk to them on November 2nd and send them back to San Francisco and send them back to Rochester. It's not that they just don't listen to we the people, the taxpayers. It's that they trample upon the Constitution with almost every act that they take. I don't know if you were listening recently when Carol Shea Porter was on a talk radio show somewhere in the district. And an average citizen called her up and asked her, you know, Congressman, I was looking through my Constitution, and I'm trying to find where it says in here that the federal government can force me to buy health insurance. And she actually had the audacity to respond to this citizen by saying, quote, the Constitution did not cover everything, unquote. The Constitution did not cover everything, quote unquote. Now that's the ideology, and that's the mindset that the federal government should take care of every American for every one of their needs from cradle to grave that brought us this disastrous bill called Obamacare. It's something that is going to be a tax on Americans for the rest of this republic. Unfortunately, we need to go down there to Washington next year and repeal Obamacare. But you know, I'm not here to just cast aspersions on the Democrats, because quite frankly, I'm a member of the Republican Party, but the Republicans are just as to blame for some of the mess we're in right now. Over the last 10 years, my Republican Party abandoned me as a conservative. They went and they spent more than we should have. A couple of weeks ago, I sent a very strongly worded letter to the chairman of the Republican Party, Michael Steele, and I got a lot of flack for it from a lot of establishment inside Republicans in Washington. They weren't happy that someone would actually stand up and say, enough of the irresponsible spending, enough of the arrogant attitudes, treat us like we deserve to be treated. Stand up for conservative principles, not the go-along to get-along attitude in Washington that got us into this mess to begin with. So let me just offer 3 prescriptions, 3 things, simple measures that can be taken to get our economy back on track and return our country to the conservative principles upon which it was founded. First, all that stimulus money that has not yet been spent should be immediately spent to pay down the national debt, not to pave 101. Not only did this ridiculous stimulus bill not create any private sector jobs, all it did was create or save government jobs. And you know, the big problem with that is we're going to be stuck paying for these government workers for the next generation. It was a terrible bill. It needs to be absolutely pared down. That money should go to retire some of that $14 trillion of national debt that's currently being held by the Chinese and folks in the Middle East. Secondly, let's create jobs by cutting taxes. Let's cut taxes for small business people. Let's cut taxes for families. They don't get it. Carol Shea Porter, instead of being a friend of small business people like me and many of you that I see in the crowd today, they seem to think the only purpose for small business is to send tax money to Washington to fund their special interests and their programs to build a bigger and somehow better utopian government. It's not. Small businesses are the engine of our economy. They need to recognize it. They need to get the regulation off the backs of small businesses and get the government's hand out of small business people's pockets. Third and finally, we need to repeal Obamacare. This is a disastrous bill that will mandate Americans to buy health insurance and penalize them if they do not. I see this sign here, 16,000 new IRS agents. We hoped for this change. I don't think that's what Americans voted for in 2008. We need to repeal it, and we need to repeal it immediately. You know, there are some people who say that the spirit of General John Stark is no longer alive. And General John Stark was the one who coined the phrase, live free or die. Your act of being here this evening shows that freedom is alive. Freedom is alive in New Hampshire. Freedom is alive in America. And we will restore freedom once again this November. Thank you for coming out. God bless you, and God bless this republic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. I want to read a few more signs. I actually saw one over here that I wanted to read. It's a yellow